of the Europe. These are the small and medium enterprises. According to the European Commission, they represent 99% of all businesses in the European Union. Our main objective is not only to just connect with and to provide support to the most vulnerable market players, because frankly speaking, small and medium enterprises have no additional internal budget, especially targeted to meeting regulatory requirements of all kinds. And there are quite a lot, in privacy. Our main goal also was to develop not to develop another awareness tool explaining the rules and procedures of the General Data Protection Regulation. Our project team aimed at developing a holistic approach for privacy compliance. Thus, supporting the business, we also contributed to robust security of data rights, introducing a privacy-friendly environment where the business works with no concerns and doubts of whether meets the higher data privacy standards in their day-to-day job. Thanks to the excellent cooperation with public sector institutions and businesses, academia and NGOs from Italy and Bulgaria, the Bulgarian Commission for Personal Data Protection, which chairperson is myself, has become the first data protection authority equipped with mobile privacy application. This is innovative initiative ensuring the highest level of protection of privacy and personal data. We are now amongst small number of supervisory authorities that completely digitalize the data controllers and data processing preparatory stage for data processing via online self-assessment tool, but also with bunch of training materials, presentations, cases, including video, that came out of more than 36 awareness-raising events conducted under the SMEDATA and SMEDATA II projects. Honestly, it was a lot of work, in addition to our everyday activities. Walking along the road, sometimes doubts arise. Is it the right solution? Are these examples sufficient? Do we actually support the small business? The answers were not easy and not coming with the finger click right at the time. But now, 3 years later, we may firmly say it is worth it. And it does because of you, all our partners, because of every single data controller who become compliant to the EU legal framework for personal data protection. We did it for these noble reasons, not for making our supervisory job easier. Such compliance turns data protection into an asset, into comparative advantage that needs to be achieved by those who want to make their business successful and competitive on the European single market. This way, they're even more competitive across the globe. They add value to their services, introducing trust and credibility to the service. That is why data protection is not just a regulatory demand. It is a way of doing business and a way of doing it well. Data protection rules are weaved in day-to-day business processes. Moreover, with the help of this project and the joint efforts of all partners, they are now completely applicable to all types of internal business activities. And this is the difference between market winners and the others. I'm certain that today we have winners more than ever, based on the projects such as SMEDATA and SMEDATA I. So without further ado, let us begin the last event under SMEDATA project. It is my real pleasure to welcome Professor Guerrino Fares from the University of Roma Tre. Please, Professor Fares, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm very proud to represent the team of Roma Tre University as the only Italian partner of the SMEDATA I and II projects on this wonderful final day. First, I would like to apologize on behalf of the whole team, especially Professor Carlo Colapietro, who is the team leader, for not being able to be here today. A series of adverse circumstances, mainly due to pandemic emergency, forced us to participate in this way. Therefore, I will not have the pleasure to shake hands to so many colleagues and professionals that I would have liked to meet today. However, I can bear witness to what the SMEDATA II project has meant for Italy and for Italian companies by trying to draw a brief overview of how things turned over the past 1 year and a half and of the project activities. As already mentioned, or as it will be mentioned several times this morning, the SMEDATA II project is a continuation of the SMEDATA I project. However, the aim of both of these initiatives was the same: to ensure timely and effective implementation of the new European data protection regulations set forth in EU Regulation 2017-679, better known as Gdpr, through the training of small and medium enterprises and their professionals. In doing so, it has been essential to strengthen and spread a culture of privacy, raising awareness among economic operators of the importance of proper processing of personal data. In addition, I would like to mention that in its second edition, the SMEDATA project was born within the framework of the Rights, Equality and Citizenship program of the DG Just of the European Commission. It is, in fact, a project co-funded with Commission funds, involving a network of public and private entities at the European level, coordinated by the Data Protection Authority of Bulgaria. In Italy, the project is being carried out by the Department of Law of Roma Tre University under the patronage of the Italian Data Protection Authority. It has been a fascinating challenge to spread awareness of the new European data protection framework among small and medium enterprises and lawyers who provide assistance to them, as well as among citizens. This past year and a half, and more generally the past 4 years during which we have been engaged in this implementation of the SMEDATA and SMEDATA II project, have led us to meet entrepreneurs, business executives, officers, lawyers, consultants, and trainers from all parts of Italy. It was really important for us to be able to engage with them, listen to their uncertainties, clarify their doubts, and work together to ensure an ever-increasing internalization of EU law. Once again, according to our characteristic pragmatic approach, we have confirmed that the law is a practical science that produces effects on people's lives, and therefore it is necessary to identify possible risks in people's everyday life. The big theoretical questions are undoubtedly important, but they concern academics, judges, lawyers, and jurists in general. For the about 4 million small businesses in Italy, and for the even more small businesses in Europe, the practical everyday problems are what really matter. We are proud of having contributed to directly providing training to so many businesses through the awareness-raising meeting, providing cascade training through the training the trainees meeting during the first part of SMEDATA, and of having supported the mobile application Gdpr in your pocket. We had truly the impression that we were responding to the real needs of the business fabric of our society, and on the other hand, we found a strong interest of the productive world. In European integration is not an abstract concept, but it is what allows the development and growth of the single market on the one hand, and the guarantee of citizens' fundamental rights on the other hand. We are together, we are therefore aware that we have played our part in a bigger picture, pushing the realization of our common values, together with many other fellow travelers. Therefore, I need to mention the many partners and colleagues in Italy. First of all, the Italian Data Protection Authority, which was partner in SMEDATA project and gave its patronage in the course of the SMEDATA II project for training and communication activities. In addition, I want to mention Confindustria both at the national and local level, in particular the Confindustria of Salerno, which collaborated with us in the both edition of the project, and Confindustria of Genoa. I need also to mention the Marco Biagi Foundation, and also the University of Modena, the University of Salerno, the University of Cosenza, and the University of Florence. Not forgetting also the private partners with whom we have collaborated, professionals in information technology law with great experience also in trading on these issues, such as the law firm Elex and the law firm Hogan Lovells. Well, I would like now to say a few words about the SMEDATA II project activities in Italy. After the 12 training meetings held during the SMEDATA Project 1, we organized another series of awareness-raising events in different cities in Italy. 28 April in Modena, 4th May in Rome, 6th May in Salerno. The purpose of these events was to train and raise awareness of small and medium enterprises on the issues involved, as well as to constantly improve the implementation of the necessary compliance requirements. I would just like to emphasize that the meetings were specifically held in various cities in Italy in order to ensure the widest territorial dissemination and involvement of as many participants as possible, as required by the grant agreement. In addition, we planned to work closely with partners on the territory in order to effectively fit into the local business fabric. Furthermore, SMEDATA II also led to development of an innovative mobile application, Gdpr in your pocket, free available on the app stores, with a user-friendly interface that best represents the content created under the project. Through the application and the various implementation of this second edition of the project, entrepreneurs will be introduced to the obligation arising from their small and medium enterprises in relation to processing of personal data. Finally, in order to provide an ideal framing of this project, we can include this initiative within that progressive integration between European market and European rights. The development of information and communication technologies and their progressive application in the market has made it necessary to add the right to be left alone, the right to the protection of personal data, understood as the right to keep control over one's own data. Thus, privacy was surpassed the dimension of mere protection of intimacy, becoming a guarantee of the right of individuals to freely make their choices without being conditioned in any way. The complex nature of the right of privacy is also manifested in important normative texts. First and foremost, the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union, the so-called NICE Charter. Article 7 states that everyone has the right to respect for his or her private and family life, home and communication, according to the logic of the right to privacy. While Article 8 states that everyone has the right to the protection of his or her personal data. After all, a functional relationship exists between inviolable rights and the right to privacy, in which the flourishing of the private sphere is a condition for the flourishing of the public sphere. Ensuring privacy helps to nurture diversity, which is an essential feature of any pluralistic society. It provides a shelter against conformist pressures, the risk of a violation of the private sphere could discourage the individual from making those existential choices through which he exercises his or her right of self-determination. The right to privacy becomes a guarantee as a prerequisite for exercising other fundamental rights in order to make possible the full development of the individual, the real and effective fulfillment of his her freedoms. This reconstruction allows to include in the core of the inviolable human rights these new rights relating to the personality, such as the right to privacy that emerge at the societal level to safeguard the dignity of the individual from the risks arising from the unstoppable technological progress. Even though technological innovations can undoubtedly be growth factors for well-being and for the improvement of the quality of life, it is equally true, however, that they impact on the inviolable rights of the individual when due attention is not paid to the use or possible misuse of personal information obtained with the proper processing of acquired data. And it is precisely in this regard that this project plays a fundamental role, since it seeks to translate into daily practice the respect for those fundamental rights that are one of the core values of the European Union. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Forez. We are really very happy that you've been able to attend and to be our significant partner into this project, contributing to a high value of the outcome of the project. As you can see, this innovative software is well used, and it's not only by small and medium enterprises, but also by citizens and a lot of experts in the area of data protection, which highly value this product that is on the market right now. So we're starting that. I would like to continue with a short overview of privacy within the last 40 years. I will show you the privacy El Camino walkaway. 40 years in personal data protection in one single page. Can you just imagine that? If someone 10 years ago, when I started working into this area, has told me that I can do it in one page, I would never believe it. We have everything here from 1981 until nowadays. And why are these years important? 1991 is Convention 108, a forward-looking act adopted by the Council of Europe. That was the first privacy regulation that started to somehow determine what privacy is, what are the rights of the individuals, and how they have to be safeguarded. Based on that regulation, in 2 years, in 1995, Directive 46 was adopted, and it became the cornerstone of protection of data, not only in Europe, but also worldwide, because all European countries developed their legislation on that. We have to go back. Christoph, can we go back? I mean, please excuse us for the organizational issues. As I already mentioned, European data protection authorities, they owe their establishment and development based on Directive 46. Our Bulgarian legislation in 2002 was developed and enforced, reflecting the Directive 46. And so our citizens in Europe, they owe the high level, the robust protection because of Directive 46. And you know that, of course, the outstanding act of our decades, the Gdpr, negotiation started in 2016, ended in 2018. Well, actually, they ended in 2016, but it was postponed, enforcement and implementation until 2018. And this is the year that changed the way how business is thinking and working throughout the world, not only in Europe. And it also changed the level of protection in Europe as well, because that harmonized the practice of all data protection authorities, not only in the 27 member states, but also in the European Economic Area, which include Liechtenstein, as well as Iceland and Norway. So that's why these are important years that I would like to highlight. So now, facing the current challenges in providing data security and data rights, I have to mention that the new challenges coming are the availability of data, because privacy somehow limited this kind of a dissemination of data. Of course, we are not against this dissemination, but it should be done in a compliant way, under certain rules. We have also imbalances of the market, and we are facing data interoperability and quality as also a challenge. That's why we are looking for the next legislation providing the data governance. Of course, the new technologies provide as well new challenges because of the data infrastructure and the compliance that this infrastructure should have with the privacy. Empowering individuals to exercise their rights is another issue, because processing of their data will be not only with automated means, but it will be widely used by the machines and the new artificial intelligence machines when they are learning and providing better services, hopefully to the human beings, that is all of us. Well, of course, the cybersecurity is always an issue, and we have to take attention about how our data is processed and the way how it is security process in the networks. And you can see why we are. Can we go on the next slide, please? Yeah. You can see a kind of a cube of gold, because I think the data is our current gold, not only the oil. And it depends how you think. Because both has, I mean, there are values for the business. I mean, both oil and gold. Because today we live in a data-driven economy. Well, unfortunately, tomorrow as well. But that's our life, and we have to understand that. So for that reasons, we have to understand the positive and the negative impacts of that coexistence, and learn to govern data to improve our lives by delivering better services. Of course, we are citizens, most probably can't do it, but because you, the business, our counterparts, are also very important of delivering that. One way is to keep data accurate and up to date, and second, find a way to multiply data value, and thus better communicate with customers, improve services, customer experience, and of course, save money for the family and small business. In addition, data improve these businesses with the opportunity to perform behavioral analytics and feedback used for offering of targeted oriented business models. This way, family and small business becomes competitive and, of course, close to customers. The second working with data and improving data quality also means improving innovation capacity of the small and medium enterprises. In addition, improving data quality helps marketing your products. Data economy is largely based on trust. And data protection, from that perspective, can be also seen as a good selling point. You have to think about that. Next slide, please. You can see the European values and rights in the digital world. And here are the different pillars of the data strategy of the European Union, which I will try to explain you why they're important. The first main pillar, that is the governance of data, it actually helps to achieve a competitive Europe, where the single market for data focuses on defending people's rights when developing technologies, and second, establishment of harmonized rules for fair access to and use of data, of course, and how it can be achieved. First, by adoption of legislative measures on data governance, access, and reuse of data. For example, for business to government data sharing for public interest, while providing control on the individual about his or her data. This means more available data in the economy, which the economy needs, and in the society as well, because people also need information, while safeguarding data rights. The second, another way is to make more high-quality public data available for use. In particular, for facilitating the reuse of public sector data, which cannot be made available as open data. This is expected to be achieved by developing new data processing infrastructure, data sharing tools, architectures, and governance mechanisms for driving data sharing in a trustworthy cloud infrastructure and related services. Well, we have to explore the need for legislative action of issues that affect as well relations between actors in the data age economy. This is part of the governance, because the legislation is very important. We are looking forward to the European Commission proposal for developing of the new Data Act. This is, of course, possible by conducting analysis of the importance of the data in the digital economy and review of existing policy framework in the context of Digital Service Act package. The second pillar, which are our enablers in this case. My understanding is that such are our investments in data, and of course, strengthening Europe's capacities and infrastructures. Those actions should aim to support data-driven innovation and stimulate demand for products and services relying on data. By introducing data-driven application on the market, will benefit citizens and businesses in many ways. They can, for example, improve healthcare. They can create safer and clear transport system. They can generate new products and services. Of course, reduce costs for public services, make them more available and close to citizens, and thus improve sustainability and also energy efficiency. This will ensure EU leadership in EU data economy. And you can see it already. A lot of third countries would love to have adequacy decision for easy transfer of data. So when we talk about competencies. We have, this is the third pillar, we have to understand that whatever public bodies do should lead to empowering individuals, investing in their skills. How to empower individuals with respect to their data? Few examples. Enhancing their portability right. More control over who can access and use machine-generated data. Investments in skills and general data literacy. People should know their rights and how to protect them. Funding for expanding the digital pool under the Digital Europe program. Updated digital education action plan for increased general data literacy. Dedicated capacity building for SMEs, for small and medium enterprises. Obligation on providers of certain data sharing services. For example, personal data apps or novel data intermediaries that should give an answer how the use of new technology tools based on blockchain technology meets the data protection requirements to be a trustworthy organizers of data sharing. So what are the common data spaces? I would just list them. Of course, health, industry, the Green Deal, mobility, finance, energy, agriculture, public administration, and human skills. So saying that, can go on the next slide, please. You can see these are the acts that we're expecting to safeguard our privacy. Most of them, indeed, will bring quite a lot of burden on authorities, as we are, especially the e-privacy regulation, the Data Act that we have been now talking about its pillars and why it is helpful for the small business, but also for us as individual citizens. Of course, we are anticipating the Governance Act because processing of data in these big quantities in the cloud with various artificial intelligence machines and engines would need to be regulated because the machines and the services should serve the human being. So all this legislation that you can see here is about how processing of data helps business, but at the same time improves our life and provides security to our personal data process in the business. So the next one. You can see here something that I used a while ago as at the first international conference as a logo motto or slogan, depends on the language that we're using. This is how I actually started my presentation 3 years ago. Future is not only what you dream, future is what you make. We have to be quite interactive, developing legislation, introducing this legislation and the compliance with that legislation in the business and in the personalized services that we get from that business. So almost 3 years later, we as a supervisory authority can offer more than 200 legal opinions, and you see the development. We can offer 1,000 information materials, leaflets, brochures, awareness-raising materials, more than 100 awareness-raising events, as well as a mobile application that you can use Gdpr in your project pocket. Yeah, it was a successful project. That's why it was my lapsus. Well, This is a self-assessment interactive tool, a good online platform for awareness raising, and also including numerous guidelines about the public sector data protection officers guide. You have to test it, and you would be surprised of the efficiency of this tool. As you know that it is available in several languages, including French, German, Italian, Bulgarian as well. So on the EU level, the EDPB, that is the European Data Protection Board, which we are a member of, each data protection authority is part of the European Data Protection Board, has issued more than 65 guidelines and recommendations addressed to the data protection authorities, harmonizing the way the legislation is enforced and practically implemented on a daily basis by these authorities, but also providing compliance and consistency within this system with regard to the business. And you as a small and medium enterprises should know and should be much more interested about these guidelines. But for you, it will be very easy to access it through our interactive privacy tool that is the Gdpr in your pocket. So I think that regardless of the challenges that I presented to you in the last 2 years, we made the future as we have planned. So thank you very much for your attention. We are here for your questions, but before that, I would be really very happy to introduce you Dushana Zdravkova, a very good lawyer, friend of mine, now representing the Union of the Bulgarian Jurists. Dushana, it is your law.
Thank you very much. And good morning to everybody. I hope that the weather in Brussels is as nice and sunny as in my home city, Varna, which is on the Black Sea coast. But speaking frankly, I would prefer to be with you in person, to have the opportunity to take more active part in the discussions, but due to personal reasons, it's not possible. So speaking on behalf of the Union of Bulgarian Jurists, the oldest and biggest organization of the legal society in Bulgaria, first of all, I would like to express our gratitude to all our partners in this, in my opinion, very successful project in 2 stages, SMEDATA I and SMEDATA II. Going back to 2017, 5 years ago, when the idea of promoting the new challenge in EU policies, GDPR, was started as discussions. These discussions, in fact, were between Union of Bulgarian Jurists, Bulgarian Commission for Data Protection, and private company APIS. We did not even realize what a big journey is ahead. But due to the international experience and strong commitment of the Bulgarian authority, the Commission for the Protection for Data Protection, and Ernst Young Law Firm and European Women Association, our Italian partners not only accepted the idea, but became a driving engine of the project. And since I have been a judge almost all my professional life, I have to conclude that now we have strong evidences for the successfulness of our project. Well, back to the topic of the dissemination of GDPR knowledge, a step towards better defending of human rights. I think that some points of the topic were covered by Mr. Karajov, speaking about European values and rights, but I would try to contribute a little bit more to this topic. So why this topic was chosen. First, it has now been more than 4 years since the General Data Protection Regulation rules came into effect, and we can see numerous examples of successful efforts of GDPR implementation. First, deep involvement of EU institutions and private entities, educational seminars, as Mr. Korojov mentioned, information campaigns, and my belief is that European citizens and companies know enough about GDPR, they are well educated, have already their experience how to deal with this new EU legislation. No doubt that GDPR is one of the strongest and most comprehensive tools globally to regulate the collection and use of personal data by governments, the private sector, and individuals. So the regulation safeguards are particularly important for human rights in the digital age. But how does the GDPR protect individuals and their human rights? The GDPR gives the people enhanced protections against unnecessary data collection, use of data in unanticipated ways, and computer-generated decisions. In the digital age, everything a person does leaves digital traces that can reveal intimate details of their thoughts, beliefs, movements, associations, and activities. The GDPR seeks to limit abusive intrusions into people's private lives through their data, which in turn protects a range of other human rights. The EU regulation gives turnover, how it is used, and with whom it is shared. You know quite well that when a company collects someone's personal data, it will often need to get consent in plain language, which means the person is often asked to opt in to collection or use of their data. So the companies have to collect and process only data which is necessary for the service. Individuals can download and view the data collected on them, ask for corrections, request their data be erased in some circumstances, and withdraw consent of the data continued use. People also have the right to object to online profiling and targeted advertising, and entities must then stop processing their personal data unless the company can demonstrate compelling legitimate grounds to do otherwise. After data is collected, companies have to be more transparent about how they share it with others. In theory, this means users are able to learn more about how companies approach online profiling and at targeting partnerships, especially those they offer web analytics, advertising, or social media services. Finally, systems that incorporate algorithmic decision-making or other forms of profiling can lead to discrimination based on race, sex, religion, national origin, or other status. And GDPR guarantees several protections under Article 22. How clear are the rights and duties under GDPR? During a survey conducted by RSM UK, one of the world's largest networks of audit, tax, and consulting firms, in cooperation with European Business Awards, over 300 companies answered a series of questions to put together their GDPR readiness statistics. Many small to medium-sized businesses had noted difficulty understanding and implementing their own GDPR compliant policies. 57% of the respondents attested that they were confident their businesses were compliant, while 13% weren't sure. However, 30% of the businesses who responded were not confident that they were GDPR compliant. The GDPR, like every relatively new set of rules, needs time to become clearer as people and companies challenge practices and interpretations of its requirements. There are already certain areas that are likely to be continuous and await further resolution. I think one safeguard is that the EU member states will still need to apply and enforce the regulation in a way what ensures respect for human rights, found in the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. And this is due to the fact that data protection is a fundamental right set out in Article 8 of the EU Charter, which states, everyone has the right to the protection of personal data concerning him or her. Such data must be processed fairly for specified purposes and on the basis of the consent of the person concerned, or some other legitimate basis laid down by law. Everyone has the right of access to data which has been collected concerning him or her and right to have it rectified. Compliance with these rules shall be subject to control by an independent authority. This means that every individual is entitled to have their personal information protected, used in a fair and legal way, and made available to them when they ask for a copy. If an individual feels that their personal information is wrong, they are entitled to ask for that information to be corrected. In order to process personal data, organizations must have a lawful reason. The lawful reasons for processing personal data are set out in Article 6 of the Gdpr. These are 6 lawful reasons for processing personal data, and they are given in the mentioned article. What else needs to be done to protect data in the right to privacy? The GDPR is a vital step towards stronger privacy protections. However, it will not be effective without interpretation, implementation, and enforcement. National data protection authorities need to rigorously respond to complaints, promptly investigate breaches, and actively pursue investigations to enforce the provisions. Many data protection authorities are not enough resourced, particularly in comparison to large companies, and lack the capacity to play a comprehensive enforcement role. Member states need to allocate appropriate financial and human resources to data protection authorities. Even with strong enforcement, there are still many structural challenges to achieving the GDPR's vision of data privacy and control. And talking about control, one of the EDPS tasks is to intervene in cases before the Court of Justice of the European Union and the General Court. There are several ways in which the EDPS can be involved in cases before the court. In practice, this means that the EDPS right to intervene in court cases is not limited to cases where personal data has been processed only by European institutions or bodies, but extends to all matters affecting the protection of personal data, either on EU or member state level. So far, the EDPS has not brought a case before the court. Unfortunately, although EDPS closely monitors the case law of the Court of Justice of the European Union and the European Court of Human Rights and produces summaries of the relevant case law of these courts and national courts of EU member states, the last one of this summary was published in 2000. So my strong recommendation is that after more than 4 years of exercising GDPR, such a summary would be of great help to the citizens, companies, and legal practitioners. And with this, I will end my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Terva. Thank you very much, Dushana. You are always a good presenter on topics as privacy. And so we are really very happy to have you in this debate. Of course, you're right. There should be evaluation of the General Data Protection Regulation. And the European Data Protection Board is undertaking such actions, but as well the European Commission, and we do hope that recently we will have some new developments improving the regulation by providing more enforcement of the regulation and strengthening this way the protection of data rights. We also need to be able to more efficiently protect EU citizens' rights when it is processed by third countries controllers. And here I would say is the role of the European Commission to further negotiate the adequacy decision with the United States. I don't know whether it will be a privacy shield or privacy seal this time, because we will need to seal the way how we are gonna working with our counterparts outside of Europe. And they have to know that when they provide services or test our behavior on the market or for other reasons, this should be done under certain rules. And these rules, as you said, are subject to independent supervision. Authorities as Bulgarian Data Protection Authority, but also in the other 26 member states and the European Economic Area also do care about safeguarding of privacy. We also do care about having a privacy-driven business. So with that said, in the morning session, I would like now to give you more heads up on the agenda. We are going to have a short coffee break by 10:30, and then we are going to discuss the challenges of the small and medium enterprises, the ethical data management, and we will have the ability to listen to Katharina Miller, a German, Spanish, and European lawyer, president of the European Women's Lawyers Association. In addition to that, we will see a topic on the perspective of DPA after 4 years of the GDPR here.
Yeah, so my name is Katharina Miller. I am a German by birth, but I waived my German citizenship, so I'm Spanish now, a very happy Spanish person. living and working in Spain, but also all around the world. I have my own businesses focused on corporate compliance and also on research integrity for universities, especially on open science with the interconnection of data protection and intellectual property rights. And I am also here with the head of being president of the European Women Lawyers Association. And first of all, I wanted to say thank you for this invitation. We are the two representatives of European Women Lawyers Association here today. And I think, yeah, we are very grateful to be here with all of you, also here in the room. Thank you very much. And online, you can always become members, not so much when you're a man, but even though you can support the European Women Lawyers Association, also the European Women Lawyers Association of Bulgaria. It's, I think, more important than ever to stick together in this, being European and yeah, not get lost behind between the United States and the other big countries. Yeah, so I would love to speak now on the ethical data management for SMEs. And I hope to give you some practical insights, yeah, even though maybe it will seem a little bit abstract, but I hope to give you practical insights. And now I cannot see my presentation anymore, which is not a problem. Yeah, here it is. Back again. So, yeah, so my presentation, I hope, is helpful for you on two parts. First of all, I hope that you as an SME will start, if you not have already started to develop artificial intelligence products, or if you don't use artificial intelligence now, I really truly hope that you do this very soon, because we need Bulgarian SMEs and SMEs in general in Europe to use artificial intelligence. And on the other hand, this presentation may also help you. For example, I don't know, in Bulgaria, if you're obliged, for example, to have gender equality plans, or if you have to disaggregate data, to see a little bit how far you can go with this. Okay. Now I would love to see my next slide, please. Yeah, so the ethics of data management. Yeah, and the next one you can also, thank you. So I would like you to imagine the ethics of data management like an ecology of data management. So you can really have this image in your mind that that's a closed circle. I will show you an image in a second, but let's go through the next text as well. So ethics in data management is not a schematic process. So if you are SMEs, and many of you are lawyers, then that might be a little bit difficult for you, because ethics in data management is not as structured as you're used in law. And if you're an SME owner or in SMEs and you're a very structured person, ethics might be a little bit a challenge for you, but don't worry, we will see how to help you. So because ethics in data management is rather an ongoing process, and it's, I call it a life cycle, in which you as SMEs are invited to question your activities from the very first moment on, when you start thinking and drafting your data processes. Yeah, next one, please. We can also leave it like this, and yeah, thank you. So here, that image might, I hope, is helpful for you. I also, for protection rights, this image was not done by me. It was developed by a scholar. If you're interested more in this, I can also give you the address. So this is the life cycle of data management for a normal SME. So first, you do planning of data. That would be the understanding of the data. You have to imagine which data do you need, what for, why do you need it. I think this is really important, that you, before you do anything with data, that you really think, or that you really develop a plan on what you want to do, and then you gather data. So that would be the life cycle of data management. Then the next point would be generating, and there you would ask yourself, which sources of data do I need? How do I generate the data? And who are my human subjects? And be always very respectful with your human subjects. I will come back to this later. Oh, and there's a spelling mistake. Sorry for this. TSCT should be. Then the next point would be processing. And there we have statistics and data integrity. There could be falsification of the data and representation and interpretation of the data. And there can lots of legal issues be and ethics issue. I will come back to this in a second. And then the last aspect of our cycle of data management would be using, sharing, and preserving. And that's the point when you do when you use the data, when it's about data ownership and access to data, and when you have to think of how to storage and protect your data. So now I would really want you to download this wonderful leaflet, which is by United Nations Human Rights Office of the High Commissioner. And this is a fantastic brochure which with the name A Human Rights-Based Approach to Data, of course, focusing on the Sustainable Development Goals. And as you can see, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 goals: participation, disaggregation, self-identification, transparency, privacy, and accountability. We won't go through all of them because we don't have that time. And not all of this is, some of these aspects are covered legally. So I think that's rather not interesting here. And let's please go to the next slide. Yeah. So we will go through 5 of these principles. And the first principle, which I think is quite interesting, is participation. What is meant by participation in this human rights-based approach? Well, participation is when relevant population groups in data collection exercises are involved, including in the planning, data collection, dissemination, and analysis of data. That means in the life cycle of the data management that you have seen before. This principle affects the process of planning and generating. So you as an SME would have to understand data and research, even though some population groups may seem distant to you, such as, for example, marginalized groups. And you should also include human subjects and generate data by relevant population groups. So let's imagine that on the one hand, you want to do statistics, internal statistics in the company, in your SME, to better know your employees. Please be aware that you also include data that might be not obvious for you, and you're allowed to do that if it serves a goal. Like, for example, I can just think of the gender equality plans, but also in human rights, there might be, in human resources, there might be other important aspects why some data and specific data is important. And on the other hand, let's imagine the case that you want to develop a machine learning product or a big data product, or even use, and I hope so you will use it again, artificial intelligence tools. Then please make sure that you really think big and you think out of the box, and not only in your little aspect and in you yourself as a normal, fantastic Bulgarian citizen working in an SME, but really thinking of maybe marginalized groups in Bulgaria that you know better than I do. Yeah, so please think bigger. And according to the human rights-based approach, the participation can be achieved by considering a range of processes that facilitate and encourage participation of relevant population groups, clearly communicating on the participatory processes and the outcomes of the exchanges to human subjects. And this is also very important, including views of vulnerable or marginalized groups and groups who are at risk of discrimination. Then we come to our next principle. That would be data disaggregation. And this is a topic I really, I'm very strong, feeling very strong about this. It's disaggregated data. And this is data that has been broken down by categories. And for example, that can be vulnerable or marginalized groups, sex or gender, ethnic or racial origin. And this aggregated data can reveal inequalities and deprivations that may not be fully reflected in aggregated data. And this principle affects the life cycles processes, planning, generating, and processing. And you as SMEs would have to integrate different categories in your data framework in the planning process. And yeah, you have to generate the different, or you know, don't have to, but I would love to invite you to generate the different categories of data and do a correct interpretation to reveal to possible inequalities and deprivations. And again, sorry for this, but I come back to these gender equality plans. In Spain, we have them, and I know in France as well. I'm looking at my French colleague. So, for example, in gender equality plans, you really only understand if there is something going on, if there are some people left behind, men and women, if you really understand what is behind the numbers. And the deeper you can go, and this is you are able to go deeper with disaggregated data, the better for the data and for your company. And according to the human rights-based approach, this can be adequately realized by generating more detailed data than national averages. And this is key in identifying and understanding inequalities, as I just mentioned before. And disaggregation of data according to characteristics identified in international human rights law, and establishing alternate sampling and data collection approaches. And there should be a last, exactly. So please go back one. Yeah, thank you. Because there's a tool that I would also like to recommend you. It's by UN Women. It was published in 2021. It's called Counted Invisible Toolkit to better utilize existing data from household surveys to generate disaggregated gender statistics. You have the whole, I will provide you with my presentation, and then you have the tool, and that gives you a better understanding how you can disaggregate data and why it is important. And now we can continue. Thank you. The third principle of the human rights-based approach is the self-identification. And this is a tricky one. I like it very much, but it's really tricky. So why is it tricky? Well, the colleagues of the human rights-based approach who developed this brochure, they say that for the purposes of data collection, populations of interest should be self-defining. Individuals should have the option to disclose or withhold information about their personal characteristics. This, of course, could interfere with the obligations of employees in your SME and the obligations of employees to give their data. But please keep in mind that there might be some information of your employees that you should not ask them to give you. Yeah, so we should be respectful with some very personal data. And this principle affects especially the process generating within the life cycle. And SMEs, as SMEs, you will have to carefully listen to the human subjects and how they want to define themselves. And this should also be foreseen in the planning process within the life cycle. It also occurs to me, coming back to the idea that you might develop machine learning products or big data or artificial intelligence. Please have this respect with population that you might categorize, also with maybe disrespectful categories. That is very important, especially then later for the machine learning and the artificial intelligence, because one, it's in, garbage out. So we have to be very, very, very careful when we treat data and when we develop data and how we label things. Very, very careful and very respectful. So it should be at the individual's discretion how and which data about their personal characteristics they want to provide. And data collection activities should be conducted in accordance with the human rights principle of doing no harm. There's another source I highly recommend. It's by the United Nations Human Rights Office on the High Commissioner. It's the same brochure, and there are also links to other brochures. And there's one more idea that I wanted to tell you. For example, in Romania, in our member state Romania, people think, SMEs and also citizens think, and even government officials think it's forbidden to gather data, disaggregate data, which is based on race and origin, because they say it interferes or it's against GDPR rules. And here I would like to say openly that this is not true. So gathering data, it's sensitive data, this is true, based on race and origin, would not be against a GDPR if it's used in the correct way. And for example, if it's used for purposes within an SME, like gender equality plans, then it's absolutely perfect to do that. I know that also France has an issue with disaggregation of data because of their constitution, the French constitution. And I think that's a problem. I'm concerned about this. And I think we will have to find a solution for that in the future, not today. Next slide, please. So we come to the principle number 4, which is transparency. And that you might be very familiar with this. According to the human rights-based approach, data collectors should provide clear, openly accessible information about their operations, including research design and data collection methodology. And data collected by state agencies should be openly accessible to the public. And this principle affects especially the processes, processing and using, sharing and preserving within the life cycle of the data management. You as an SME should act with data integrity, and of course, never ever falsify any data. So please make this effort, extra effort, to use the data as it is and not falsify it. That is very important for everybody, for you in the first place, but for everybody. You should furthermore make your data usage public if it's not for your private economic concerns, and give access to the public if possible. Of course, if it's part of your business plan, then don't do it. And this would also be in line with the FAIR principles, and the FAIR principles are the findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable principles for data management. And according to the human rights-based approach, this principle of transparency can be fulfilled by making information about data collection publicly available and disseminating of data as quickly as possible after its collection, if it's within your business plan, of course. Next one and last slide. No, sorry, one back. Yeah. On the principles, we come to accountability, which is also a very important principle. And according to the human rights-based approach, data collectors are accountable for upholding human rights in your operations, and the data that you collect should be used to hold states and other actors to account on human rights issues, even though it's only about your business. And this principle affects the whole life cycle of data management of SMEs, because SMEs, you are also accountable for respecting, protecting, and fulfilling human rights of the human subjects at all times, and of the 4 processes of the life cycle of data management, which we see now again. Thank you very much. So here again, you have this image: planning, generating, processing, using, sharing, and preserving. Try to memorize this when we now go into 3 business cases that I would like to go with you quickly. Next slide, please. And the first one is the case Amazon. And one more, thank you. No, one back. The Amazon case is one of my favorite cases. Why? Because everything was done with good intentions. I know that because I know people from Amazon, and then ended up being a horrible business case. Why? What did happen? So Amazon in 2014, they developed a job applicants' resumes artificial intelligence tool. Why did they do that? Well, they thought they wanted to be as inclusive as possible and to get only the best people, the best employees to work for Amazon. And the top talents. However, a year later, only 1 year later, they had to take this application down. Why? What did happen? Well, they realized that this application tool was discriminating women, only women. Why? What did happen? Well, in the life cycle of the management, data management, they did not pay enough attention to maybe the planning part, because in their planning part, they included, or they decided only to include CVs of the last 10 years. But most of people that work at Amazon or worked at Amazon at that time were men. So of course the CVs of the last 10 years, so from 2004 until 2014, were CVs based on male abilities, which is great. But if you want to be inclusive, this is not so great. So the machine learning was fed with fantastic CVs by men. And whenever a woman entered her CV and the word woman appeared, then she got rejected automatically, machine learning. And so Amazon realized that very quickly and had to take this off. So please, dear SMEs, if you ever want to develop something similar, and I really think we should do this here in Europe, be aware of the Amazon case and yeah, be as inclusive as possible in your planning phase. Next slide, please. Case Oracle, another wonderful case. No, sorry, yeah. On how you should not do things. So Oracle, they have, it's an omnibus recruiting cloud product. So this is a product where you can register. It's quite expensive. It's a fantastic, fantastic application. I don't want to speak badly about Oracle. So if somebody here is working in Oracle, apologies for taking this as an example. And this software provides employers with predictions about the likelihood a candidate will accept a job offer and what an employer can do to increase the candidate's chance of acceptance. And the tricky thing here is, from a human rights perspective and an ethics perspective, that the employer can adjust salary, bonus, stock options, and other benefits to see in real time how the prediction changes. And the tool can update itself with the employer's data about the outcome of the previous offers and acceptance over time. What is the problem? There are many problems, but follow me to test the most obvious ones. Because tools like this might amplify pay gaps for women and workers, not only of color, but we have other marginalized groups within, I imagine in Bulgaria, but within whole Europe. In Spain, there would be especially Roma population. And human resource data commonly include ample proxies for workers' socioeconomic and racial status, which could be reflected in salary requirement predictions. And in any case, offering employers highly specific insight into a candidate's salary requirements increases information asymmetry between employers on the one hand and the candidates at a critical moment of the negotiation. So it's not fair at all if the employer has so much information about you, about your background, and knows how to pressure you. So that's not okay. Oracle, yeah, you should rethink this. And SMEs, dear SMEs, if you have thought of creating something similar, please be aware not to be invasive and always respectful. Next slide, please. Case hire view. This is an application, a US-American application, which is really tummy ache. I think it's a fascinating application, I have to say, but I will tell you what is provoking me tummy ache, or yeah. So the thing is, imagine that you have, and that happened during COVID, you have a video interview, and that the application, while you're giving a video interview, is recording everything of you. So your face, how you pronounce, how you watch in the camera, how you interact, if you move a lot to your face or not, if you're very interactive. So this application, Hire View, is able to capture all of this. What can be a problem? Well, there can be many problems, and I know that my colleague later will also tackle some of these issues, so sorry for tackling it already a little bit. So first of all, the speech recognition software can perform poorly, especially for people with regional and non-native accents. For example, I am not native English, and it could be that Hire View would punish me for this, yeah, and would treat a US American or English speaking native person much better than myself. Also, their facial analysis systems can struggle to read the faces of women with darker skin. We know that. I think it has been now, we have been telling each other this for the last 3-4 years. The legitimacy of using physical features and facial expressions that have no credible causal link with workplace success to make or inform hiring decisions, that can be a problem. And then a test that have the effect of considering someone's immutable characteristics, even if they do so in a facially legal way, may violate expectations of dignity and justice, and prevent candidates from making a good faith effort to demonstrate their suitability for a job. And last but not least, moreover, some worry, and I include myself, that interviews that might be rewarded for irrelevant or unfair factors like exaggerated facial expressions and penalized for visible disability or speech impediments. So higher view is really, I think, a very good business case to see how invasive applications can be and how we in Europe should not do things. And dear Bulgarian SMEs, if you think to create something similar, like an video interview system, do so. It's important that we in Europe become stronger in developing these kind of artificial intelligence tools and applications. But please be always aware that in your whole cycle of data management, that you be as respectful as possible and as ethical as possible. And now we come to my last slide, which would be a discussion. And I'm happy, I don't know if there are some questions online or some remarks or somebody who thinks this is really awful and does not make sense at all. Happy for any feedback. And if not now, I'm also happy you can find us, European Women Lawyers Association. There's an email address, info@eula.org. We are also always available for you for your questions. Once again, good luck. We need you, dear SMEs. Do something. Yeah, don't be afraid of data protection, and you don't have to be afraid. Just be respectful. I think this is a good recommendation. And thank you once more for listening to me. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. I don't know if you can hear me. I'm Marco Leone, and I'm a legal officer of the Italian Data Protection Authority. And first of all, I would like to thank the University of Roma Tre and the Bulgarian Data Protection Authority and all other partners of the SMEDATA project for inviting me and allowing me to share some thoughts with you. Today, my presentation will be focused on the experience of a DPA after 4 years of implementation of the GDPR. Obviously, I will share my own personal experience, so my ideas and thoughts are not necessarily those of the Italian Data Protection Authority, which I work for. So I will share some slides with you. Probably the sharing button is disabled. Could you please activate it? Thank you very much. Just a few seconds. Okay, I will start with a quote, with the words of the European Data Protection Supervisor, according to which the GDPR has been a sensational achievement for Europe and its citizens, acting as a lighthouse for the entire global policymaking scene and illuminating long-held privacy and data protection values across the horizon of the European legislative landscape. Well, actually, as also highlighted by the European Commission in a report issued 2 years ago, the GDPR has proven to be an overall success meeting many of the expectations we had. It has strengthened data protection safeguards and has created a level playing field for all companies operating in the EU market, including small and medium enterprises, by also guaranteeing the free flow of personal data within the EU. We can say that the GDPR is still an important element for the purpose of the digital transition of the economy and society as a whole. In an economy increasingly based on the processing of data, including personal data, the GDPR is an essential tool to ensure that individuals have better control over their personal data and that such data are processed in a lawful and fair and transparent way. I'm personally persuaded that the GDPR is such a beautiful and elegant piece of legislation, as it is based on some fundamental principles, notably those set forth in Article 5 of the GDPR, including the accountability principle, which operates as a sort of, I would say, privacy constitution, granting the possibility to effectively ensure the protection of personal data in a variety of different contexts in a complete technology neutral way, providing the necessary flexibility to accommodate different approaches, even in critical circumstances, like, for example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, where the GDPR has proven to be a sufficiently flexible tool to allow practical solutions to be used while always ensuring a high level of protection of personal data. As highlighted by the European Commission, small and medium enterprises are the backbone of the European economy. They represent the 99% of all businesses in the EU and employ around 100 million people. They also account for more than half of Europe's gross domestic product, and therefore play a key role in the context of the digital EU economy. They often are technology-focused businesses providing innovative solutions in fields such as 5G, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, blockchain, telemedicine, so providing products and services which may involve quite risky processing operations. More in general, small and medium enterprises are increasingly depending on information technology. Also in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen how important the internet and computers in general are for SMEs to maintain their businesses. Many of them had taken the opportunity to continue their operation online by adopting cloud services, upgrading their internet services and improving their websites, and most importantly, by enabling staff to work remotely. Well, in this scenario, the practical implementation of the GDPR can be quite challenging for them. The GDPR does not work as simply as a traffic light with red, yellow, and green lights, with straightforward rules and with predetermined sanctions that you can predict in case of breach of specific rules. Instead, the GDPR is built on the concept of accountability, leaving to data controllers the responsibility for making their choices on the basis of the specific context in which they operate, at the same time requiring them to be accountable towards data subjects and supervisory authorities by proving that the choices they made were the right ones. Accountability is the core principle of the GDPR. It means in practice that it's up to the data controller, on the basis of the specific features of the processing and the risks arising out of it, to make its choices and be able to prove compliance, especially with the principles set forth in Article 5, including lawfulness, transparency, purpose limitation, minimization, storage limitation, and security. Flexibility, freedom of choice, technological neutrality obviously come with responsibility. And this is not something abstract, a topic for discussion among scholars and privacy experts only. In many decisions issued by the Italian Data Protection Authority and also other supervisory authorities, data controllers have been sanctioned for having breached the principle of accountability, as they failed to sufficiently prove compliance with such principle. Obviously, this approach can be, I would say, disorienting for SMEs, which may lack of sufficient financial and human resources to carry out sophisticated legal assessments and be ready to adapt their strategies and procedures to a non-black or white piece of legislation like the Gdpr. For example, let's think about security measures. The Gdpr does not provide for a list of minimum or standard security measures, but it generally provides for the controller's obligation to ensure security by implementing appropriate technical and organizational measures to ensure a level of security which is appropriate to the risk. How to do it is up to the data controller. The GDPR risk-based approach is horizontal, as there are no exemptions or lightweight approaches based on the organization size, resources, and capabilities. Similar to large organizations, SMEs have to identify the level of risk depending on nature, scope, context of processing, along to the types and the volumes of data processed. And while big companies have the possibility to respond to and appropriately implement data security frameworks, SMEs do not always have the necessary expertise and resources to do so. Indeed, it is in many cases difficult for them to understand the specificities of the risks associated with personal data processing, as well as to assess and manage those risks following a formal methodology. In the light of the risk-based approach, the GDPR cannot provide derogations based on the size of the operators, as their size is not in itself an indication of the risks that the processing of personal data they undertake can create for individuals. I think that we have to imagine data protection in the same way as we think about food safety, for example. We will never lower the food safety rules to small and medium food companies, as the consumer safety is a value that cannot be compromised on the ground of the size of the business. And the same is for data protection, which is a fundamental right. According to a guidance document issued by the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity in June 2021, dedicated to cybersecurity for small and medium enterprises, the majority of them, more than 80%, process critical information, making cybersecurity a key concern, where critical information refers to information that if stolen or lost, the data controller will face serious legal consequences, and the data subjects would face significant or even irreversible consequences. So I personally think that any possible future reform of the GDPR shall not provide for more relaxed rules for SMEs. Nor I think that such more relaxed rules should be introduced for certain less risky categories of data processing, given that even in the current regulatory framework, data controllers which process personal data for normal contractual and administrative purposes are subject to quite simple and reasonable obligation. if we lower the threshold of the obligations, the threshold of the controller's compliance will proportionally also reduce, which is something that I think we cannot afford in the digital society we live in. So based on my experience as a legal officer of a data protection authority, I will try to identify some trends regarding how the GDPR is implemented by small and medium enterprises. So first of all, privacy culture. Many SMEs are still reluctant in embracing a genuine privacy culture within their organization. They often perceive data protection as a legal burden, so they only try to achieve a minimum level of compliance, or in the worst cases, an apparent and ephemeral compliance. Data protection isn't something that can be done overnight. It's an ongoing journey. This kind of approach, or negative approach, I think is preventing small and medium enterprises from benefiting of all the opportunities offered by the data protection regulatory framework. By way of example, let's think about the right to portability. Such right, coupled with an increasing number of individuals in search for more privacy-friendly solutions, basically have the potential to lower the barriers to entry for businesses and open the possibilities for growth based on trust and innovation, especially for startups and technology-based small and medium enterprises. Another point is privacy by design and by default. Many small and medium enterprises have not fully understood the importance of implementing such principles at the very early stage of the design of new products and services, regardless of the obligation to carry out a privacy impact assessment when needed and required. They tend to deal with data protection only superficially or when an issue arises in the course of their relationship with customers. Another critical point is the reliance on third-party suppliers. SMEs tend to rely too much on third-party suppliers for the purpose of complying with the GDPR without carrying out an appropriate due diligence about the effectiveness of the level of compliance of the third-party products and services on the top of which they build their own products and services. In many cases, during our investigations, data controllers have tried to defend themselves on the ground that they have demanded the most important choices about the futures of the processing, especially for what concerns security measures, to their suppliers. In all such cases, the authority have reminded data controllers that according to Article 5, Paragraph 2 and Article 25 and Recital 74 of the GDPR, data controllers have a general responsibility and liability for any processing of personal data that they carry out directly or through third-party processors. Moreover, ex post controls on data processors in the course of the relationships are quite rare. Another important element to be highlighted, in my opinion, is that small and medium enterprises often do not have the sufficient contractual power to counterbalance the contractual power of big tech companies or of large company suppliers. And obviously, this criticality puts them in a very difficult situation when it comes to enforcement, because from the perspective of data protection supervisory authorities, if a processing breaches the applicable data protection law, the liability is entirely on the data controller, regardless of the specific contractual arrangements with data processor. And in such respect, I think it's very important that associations of small and medium enterprises coalesce and stay together in an effort to counterbalance such contractual power of big tech companies, by, for example, promoting the adoption of standard model contracts, or by directly entering into the negotiation for the purchase of technology services, especially cloud computing services. The next item is the role of the DPOs. Most small and medium enterprises have not fully understood the role and importance of the DPO. Obviously, in those cases where a DPO must be designated, they tend to consider the DPO as a privacy consultant. Given that the DPO is paid for the job, he or she is supposed to be responsible for ensuring the whole compliance with the law, and practically is supposed to do all the things that the controller should do according to the law. Especially in smaller organizations, data protection officers often receive the title on the top of their pre-existing full-time duties without any reduction to their workload or obligations. As such, they do not have enough time to focus appropriately on data protection topics. The GDPR rather provides for the general responsibility of the controller, considering the DPO as a sort of supervisor who is required to independently provide support to the controller and supervise the processing as a whole. Moreover, in many cases, data controllers tend not to involve the DPO or to hide critical information to him or her, having fear that the DPO's involvement may hamper the business, so completely frustrating the DPO's role within the organization. The last trend that I want to highlight is the interplay with the consumer law. SMEs tend to underestimate the constantly increasing interplay between data protection and consumer law. Non-compliance with the GDPR may expose them to sanctions, both from the protection and competition supervisory authorities. By way of example, the lack of transparency towards data subjects or the exploitation of personal data without sufficient legal basis might be also considered as an unfair commercial practice by competition supervisory authorities. So we are going towards a kind of unified regulatory game field where businesses have to build an effective multidisciplinary compliance at once, and where non-compliance can produce an undesired domino effect with unpredicted consequences for businesses. But there are some positive trends too. Privacy has become a hot topic. There is no doubt that one of the greatest achievements of the GDPR is that it has fueled a huge debate around the topic of personal data protection. Data protection is no longer, the elephant in the room, and all companies, even small or medium-sized ones, are no longer ignorant of the topic and are aware, at least on a general level, of their obligations and the possible risks associated with data protection. Privacy is becoming a business asset too. Information is probably the most crucial asset for any organization, including SMEs in the information society and the digital economy. But consumers, in their turn, are becoming increasingly intentional about what types of data they share and with whom. Because the stakes are so high and consumer awareness of these issues is growing, the way companies handle consumer data and privacy is becoming a point of differentiation and even a source of competitive advantage over other businesses. Consumers are not willing to share data for transactions if they do not trust the businesses with they have relationships in the market. They even may walk away from doing business with companies whose data privacy practices they don't trust, they don't agree with, or they don't understand. Another interesting point is that Dpos expertise is improving after an initial phase in which many Dpos were inaccurately designated, lacking the necessary professional expertise. Now we are starting to see that data controllers and data processors, even within small and medium-sized enterprises, are more carefully selecting their Dpos, and the latter have an overall satisfactory level of expertise and experience, and therefore are much more able to provide better assistance and interact with supervisory authorities. We are also noticing a higher cooperation level with the data protection authorities, which is a good indicator of the fact that there is an increased awareness of data protection obligations within organization. So we should promote dialogue and cooperation between data controllers and authorities in order to increase the data controllers' attitude for being proactive and have a positive approach during the implementation process. Which are the most frequent compliance gaps that we have encountered during the enforcement process? The first one relates to the concept of personal data and data protection roles. Often small and medium enterprises have struggled in understanding what personal data is and what is not. They tend to think, for example, that pseudonymized data or encrypted data are not personal data, which is a very common mistake. They don't understand the difference between the role of data controller and data processor, and where a situation of joint controllership may exist. They have problem in identifying a legal basis for processing. They tend, for example, to use consent where consent cannot be a legal basis. For example, when there is a situation of not fair balance between data controller and data subjects, they tend to ignore the need for minimization. For example, in the online environment, when they offer online services, they tend to collect as much data as possible, because, for example, they do not know from a very early stage what to do with the data. So they collect a huge amount of data in breach of the minimization principle. Another critical area is international data transfers. Obviously, here we have a quite critical legal scenario, especially for what concerns transfers to the United States. But there is such a low level of awareness here. Think about, for example, the use of tools like Google Analytics, the French data protection authorities and other European data protection authorities have started to enforce in this area, highlighting that the transfer of personal data towards the United States in the context of the use of tools like Google Analytics may cause a breach of the applicable data protection laws. And once again, this is a problem which is connected with the low contractual power that small and medium enterprises have when they deal with and negotiate with the tech giant, like for instance, Google, Microsoft, in purchasing standard product and services. Transparency is also a critical area, especially small and medium enterprises struggle with designing, drafting simple and privacy-oriented privacy policies. They do not use icons, they do not use plain language, especially when they deal with children and minors. So there is much more to do in this area to improve their policies and practices in order to ensure transparencies. Data processing agreements, we still see in a lot of situations data controllers not having regulated their relationships with suppliers as required by Article 28 of the GDPR, which is quite strange after 4 years of implementations. And several decisions have been issued by the Italian Data Protection Authority, by also other European authorities, clarifying that this is not just a formal obligation for controllers, but is a substantial requirement for ensuring that personal data are processed according to the instructions within the limits set forth by data controllers in all cases where data processing are externalized to data processors. The last point is about data protection impact assessment. In many cases, we have seen that no data protection impact assessment had been carried out by data controllers in cases where risky processing were at stake. And in other many frequent cases, even if a data protection impact assessment had been drafted by the data controller, it was not consistent with the methodology indicated by the European Data Protection Board, and they were not sufficiently comprehensive to prove how the risk associated with the processing had been moderated by the data controller in the light of the measures envisaged to ensure that such risks are acceptable for data subjects. So, you know, methodologies used so far have to improve, have to be consistent with the standardized methodology issued at the international level. And so this is an area where small and medium enterprises have to improve a lot. So my last slide is about how we can support small and medium enterprises in ensuring compliance. So first of all, we have to insist on ensuring that they are aware of their obligations. And all the European data protection authorities, together with the EDPB and the Dpos, as well as universities and other public and private institutions, I think they are doing an impressive job in spreading knowledge in a variety of forms. The SMEDATA project is just an excellent example of this outstanding effort carried out to the benefit of small and medium enterprises. And so we have to advertise as much as possible the advantages of maintaining consumer trust, operational efficiency and sustainability and data security. And so we always have to remind to ourselves that one of the main goals of the GDPR is to allow the free flow of personal data within the EU. Businesses, including SMEs, now have just one set of rules to which they have to adhere. Without the GDPR, a single unified and fair game field for European businesses would not have been possible. Moreover, the implementation of some provisions of the GDPR, like the right to data portability, has the potential to lower the barriers to entry to data protection-friendly services. But the GDPR is just a milestone, it's not the end of the journey. Think about the European Commission's proposal for a data act, which provides for measures to rebalance negotiation power for small, medium contractual imbalances in data sharing contracts. The Data Act will shield them from unfair contractual terms imposed by parties with significantly stronger contractual power. And the Commission will also develop model contractual terms in order to help such companies to draft and negotiate fair data sharing contracts. I would also like to talk about privacy enhancing technology, not from the perspective of the data subjects, but from the perspective of data controller. In some way, privacy enhancing technology can be a powerful tool to support small and medium enterprises in complying with the data protection obligation. Just to mention a few examples, the Italian DPA has developed a self-assessment online tool to help data controllers evaluating whether they have to notify a data breach to the DPA and data subjects. The French DPA has developed PIA, an open source software which helps to carry out data protection impact assessment in an easy and practical manner. Also, the Spanish DPA has developed Gestiona, a tool designed to enable those companies and public entities that process high-risk personal data to conduct risk analysis and impact assessments. And of course, it's worth mentioning also the app Gdpr in your pocket, which has been developed in the context of the SMEDATA project, which is the purpose of allowing enterprises in an easy to use and easy to understand way to have a clear overview of their obligations under the GDPR. The third critical point, in my opinion, is the need to engage DPOs. Without the support of the DPOs, supervisory authorities would have a very limited possibility to prevent breaches of the data protection law, given the limited human resources they have compared to the size of the market and territories that they have to oversee. When a supervisory authority imposes a sanction over a company, that is, in my opinion, a failure for the data protection community as a whole. Creating a strong relationship with DPOs, training them, and be open to discussion with them is therefore essential to spread a sound privacy culture within organization, especially within small and medium enterprises. As far as the Italian Data Protection Authority is concerned, in the last years, we have organized many conferences and events expressly dedicated to DPOs, a sort of live tour in many Italian cities for the purpose of physically meet DPOs and let them know that they are the best allies of the authority for the purpose of ensuring compliance. The response has been huge, and the beneficial effects of this constructive dialogue are more than evident in our day-to-day work in the enforcement phase. Codes of conduct. Such codes, as we know, are powerful tools for enabling a specific sector to hone and resolve key data protection challenges. They are an excellent way of demonstrating accountability and can significantly simplify the compliance effort for organizations. Trade associations and bodies who are able to speak on behalf of a group of organizations should therefore be encouraged to create codes of conduct. As far as Italy is concerned, so far 3 codes of conduct have been proposed and approved, although there are some open working table on this matter. We need to insist on the importance of adopting codes of conduct, and this should be a main objective for European supervisory authorities and the whole data protection community at the European level. Last point that I want to highlight is pragmatic enforcement. In order to gain the small and medium enterprises' confidence and trust, we need to ensure that the supervisory authorities' enforcement action remains very pragmatic. As far as Italy is concerned, we are always trying to enforce the law by imposing sanctions only where substantial and severe infringements have been committed by companies. We also avoid, in general, any formalistic interpretation of the law, and are doing our best effort to support the idea that privacy compliance is not about filling in papers and deal with bureaucracy, but rather is about ensuring effective and practical compliance. I think that we have to increase legal certainty for small and medium enterprises and working towards incentives for privacy-based innovations. Thank you very much for your attention. Sure, I will return the host, sorry.
So hi, everyone. My name is Laetitia. I'm an associate working at Linklaters, mainly on IT contracting and data protection. And today I will give a short presentation about one of the hottest topics among the already hot topics, GDPR and privacy compliance. And that's EU-US data transfers. So next slide. As you know, the principle under GDPR is that you cannot transfer data outside of the EA unless certain conditions are met. So the first option is that there is an adequacy decision, and then you can transfer the data, the personal data, outside of the EA. Alternatively, you need to make sure that there are appropriate safeguards in place. And we will come back to that later during the presentation. And then third option is that you can rely on a derogation to process personal data outside the EA. So for example, one of them is consent, explicit consent from the data subject, provided that the data subject is fully aware of the risks involved in the transfer. Another example of a derogation is that you have to start proceedings against someone. Now, in practice, we see that these derogations, it's very difficult to fulfill the conditions of a derogation. So it hardly happens that anyone relies on those derogations. So next slide. So the first option that I mentioned to transfer data outside of the EA is relying on an adequacy decision. So that's, of course, the easiest option if there is an adequacy decision in place and the European Commission has actually decided that a country is adequate in terms of protection to process or to process personal data too. And so the purpose of this presentation was also to give you a quick update on what is ongoing with the different mechanisms. And for example, for the adequacy decision, we know that there are, of course, new countries that have received an adequacy decision, such as the UK. But in the meantime, there is also an ongoing revision of the pre-GDPR adequacy decision. So, for example, Andorra, Switzerland, for these decisions, currently investigating whether it's still appropriate to keep those adequacy decisions. And then, privacy shields, good times. So first, as you know, probably know, the privacy shield has been invalidated, which made it, of course, much more difficult to transfer data to the US. But now in March, a political agreement has been reached on a new mechanism. And so the current status is that the US is adopting or about to adopt an executive or drafting an executive order, which puts in place certain measures to make sure that have been agreed with the EU to make sure that data can be safely transferred to the US. One of those measures is, for example, a redress mechanism in the US that there are, you can go to boards to complain about certain transfer or certain processing activities. So actually now we are expecting this executive order to be ready for review by the European Commission in the summer. And given that it still has to go to the EDPB and through the comitology process, it will probably not be ready before the end of the year. So that's the first option for such data transfers. Now we can go to the next slide. So this is a short repetition of the Schrems II case, but I'm sure you have heard of it. So as a result of the Schrems II case, companies were no longer able to rely on the privacy shield. So many companies are affected, both large companies, SMEs, also of their clients, because their clients are now wondering, can we still use that US supplier, for example, for cloud services? And also in the Schrems II case, the European Court has said that transfers need to be assessed on a case-by-case basis, so that for US transfers, and TIA, that's how it's called, needs to be performed. And so we can go to the next slide. How can we perform such TIA that I just mentioned? So the EDPB, the European Data Protection Board, has issued a recommendation in which describes some of the European essential guarantees. We'll not discuss them in detail, but those are the European essential guarantees, for example, an independent oversight mechanism, necessity and proportionality tests. So we can go to the next slide. When performing a TIA, so in the situation that we're not able to rely on adequacy decision, but instead have to perform a TIA, those are the different steps we see. So first, we identify the data transfer, then the tools such as standard contractual clauses, BCR. Then we assess whether the transfer tool is effective in light of the European essential guarantees that were mentioned on the slide before. And then where necessary, that's then step 4, supplementary measures need to be adopted and need to be considered where any procedural steps are required. And as a last step, you need to reevaluate that at appropriate intervals. So that's already a lengthy and difficult process. And in practice, we also see that a lot of SMEs and large companies struggle with that, because if you have to perform such TIA for every transfer, even of only a limited number of data, yeah, it's of course a very lengthy process and not an easy one as well. So then we can go to the next slide. Last year, the European Commission adopted new standard contractual clauses. But as mentioned before, it's not because you have those new standard contractual clauses that everything is fine, that you just need to complete them. It needs to be supplemented by such TIA. So, of course, the new set of standard contractual clauses replaces the older one, and the deadline is to replace them all by 27th of December. So it means that if you have contracts with old SECs, you actually need to replace them with the new ones, and also, of course, perform the TIA that I mentioned before. So we can go to the next slide. So at Linklaters, we have an automation tool which allows you to easily replace old SECs by new ones. So the process is mentioned there. So your old SECs are uploaded in an artificial intelligence tool, and this does that tool extracts the relevant data, and then after validation, new SECs will be ready, because as you know, in SECs you have to fill in quite some details about the processing activities, the data importer, the data exporter, and instead of doing it all manually, we have the tool that can extract that information from the previous SEC's completed version and insert it into the new ones. So that's, of course, something you need to think about as well. And of course, the new SEC, so you can go to the next slide, they're also changed in terms of content. So there are liability caps in there. There are also new types of SECs, as you may know. For example, there is now processor-to-processor SECs version, while before you only had controller-to-controller or controller-to-processor. And then we can go to the next slide. Another mechanism that you can use. So one safeguard are the SECs. Another one are the binding corporate rules. Those rules, it's a timely process to go through the process drafting binding corporate rules and are mostly adopted by multinationals. So they are binding upon affiliates and employees, and they are legally recognized as well. So if you have that intercompany, that's very a practical way to ensure that data transfers can be executed in a compliant way as well. So you can go to the next slide. This mentions the benefits of such BCRs. So it allows flexibility and self-regulatory approach. It's cost efficient in the long run if you're like a large multinational company, which is of course less the case for SMEs. So you can go to the next slide. The more companies that have such BCRs in place for their transfers are Lego, Linklaters as well. We're working BNP Paribas. So we can go to the next slide. So as we've now just discussed, and I hope that's the key takeaway here, it's rather difficult if in the absence of a privacy shield to transfer data to the US nowadays, because you have to rely on a mechanism such as SECs or BCRs complemented by a TA. And now we also see that, for example, the regulators are really focusing on data transfers to the US. So, and especially the use of Google Analytics or Facebook. So a task force has been created. The CNIL, the European Data Protection Supervisor, and also Dpos in other countries are really looking into the use of Google Analytics and Facebook Connect nowadays. So if you're an SME, currently it may be recommended to not use that anymore for quite some time, because you really have there a large risk in terms of compliance. And then you can go to the next slide. So then that's a bit the question which I wanted to have a discussion on as well. Are we heading towards a culture of data protection and protectionism? Because, for example, recently a decision has been issued by the administrative court and actually concerned a German university that integrated a cookie management tool that collected data about users. So the cookiebot tool that was integrated was based in Denmark, but a US-based provider was used. So there was no data transfer as itself to the US, but of course there was a theoretical access by that US-based provider of the personal data of that tool. And the court considered that in such case, a data transfer solution and supplementary measures should have been put in place. So even though there was actually no real access by that US-based provider. So then the question arises, will it remain an isolated case, or will we see that such cases more often? And how can we protect ourselves against that? So if you have any questions about it for me, we're in the... Okay, so that was it. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Good afternoon from the coordinator of the SMEDATA II Project. After a short lunch break, we'll continue our agenda. We'll start again at 1:45. Thank you.
Shopping inside your ocean. One day will make you glad.